welcome. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for the second day of this event, Innovative INOS, bringing open knowledge and innovation to higher education. I'm Hélène Schweilm. I'm Head of Innovation Opportunities Department at the University of Bordeaux. And I will be your host with my colleague Amalia de Götzen from Aalborg University during this session. So I'm not going to be long, but just a few words about the INOS project. The project is composed by 4 universities. Welcome to my colleagues. So the Aalborg University and the University of Bordeaux, but also Tallinn University, Oulu University, and LIBER and Web2Learn. So we are all really delightful to take these 2 days time to present and discuss the outputs of these 3 years projects. Which is funded with the support of the Erasmus Plus program. So for those who weren't there yesterday, just a few words about INOS. INOS means integrating open and citizen science into active learning approaches in higher education. So since 2019, the project has developed reflections, tools to encourage higher education institutions to be part of open and citizen science movement through teaching, learning, and training. So one of our main objectives was indeed, and it would be the topic of the day, to problematize the social impact of higher education institution as knowledge creation, sharing, reuse ecosystems, and to better situate the role of universities in current demand for civic engagement, societal impact, and learning opportunities for all. So that will be the topic of today. Just a brief overview of the program of this morning. So just yesterday, after the first day was dedicated to a general introduction to the main concepts. Indeed, we had a very insightful lecture from Giovanni Schiuma from LIBER University around the learning spaces to foster knowledge dynamics. So Professor Schiuma will join us for the round table later as a great witness. And after in the afternoon and yesterday, we took time to present demos, tools, experiences within workshops. And now it's time to finish, to open a discussion on the social and innovative role of university through open and citizen science. So this topic was a little bit introduced on yesterday evening because we had a knowledge cafe on open data. We're going to talk about open data today as well. During this first talk, we'll continue to explore the dimension of social innovation, first with Amalia de Götzen, with a lecture entitled Beyond Open and Citizen Science, Social Innovation and Open Data, example from the field. And by discussing citizen science through several educational institutions with Kai Pata from Tallinn University. Finally, Rosie Allison from LIBER Europe will deliver a presentation of another important output deliverable of the project, a roadmap to co-create a shared vision for citizen science. So before giving the floor to Amalia, my last recommendation would be don't hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. And after a short break, stay connected because we'll conclude these 2 days with a roundtable aiming to go beyond INOS by asking the question of integrating and structuring open and citizen science within institution and European projects. So if everyone is ready, it only remains me to remind you that there is a hashtag innovative INOS around the event, so don't hesitate to use and reuse it. And then I just give the floor to Amalia, who is Associate Professor at the Department of Architecture, Design and Media Technology at Aalborg University. So, Amalia, thank you. And I'll let you share your screen.
Yes. Yes, and you can see the slides. Thanks, Hélène, for the nice introduction, and thanks everybody for joining us today. So, yes, my name is Amalia de Götzen, and I'm a part of the Service Design Lab at Aalborg University. And in our research group, we work quite a lot with social innovation, and we had also some projects besides INOS that are mainly related to open data. So we are around 10 people in our lab, and we practice service design in different contexts. So this is what we define as our mission: to research and apply service design as an exploratory, co-creative, and empowering approach to address issues of societal concern. So, as you can see, the societal aspect of the research that we are doing and the impact that our research aim to have on society is always in the foreground. We love to say that service design is a pluggable discipline, so you can work on service design in very different contexts, from healthcare, IT context, transportation, and so on. Services are everywhere, right? But within our research group, we look at service design mainly with three focuses. So one is the one I'll talk mainly about today. So the relation with between service design and data. Again, focusing on a design perspective. And in this topic, let's say we work mainly on two sides. So on one way is what are, let's say, the tools and methods that designers are missing to work with the data material, and can be data also a material for design. On the other side, we work on the concept of data as a commons, which is let's say the aspect that is mainly, interesting for this presentation today, right? And so how we can transform the value that the co-creation process provides when we are designing for data-driven services. What kind of bottom-up approaches we should have there, how to curate data as a commons. The other perspective we look into when we talk about service design, it's service design management and strategy. And so here we look at design-driven approaches to help organizations to, be more strategic, forward-looking, and so on. And we work a lot also on foresight here as well. And then civic service design, which is the broader topic, mainly related to social innovation. Of course, when we work in the different projects, and also when we talk about open data, we will see then, I hope, through the presentation that these three different, let's say, lenses through which we look at services and we design for services are, of course, overlapping, and they are all included in the projects that we work on. So social innovation, as I said, is one of the core, let's say, topics and themes that we work on in our research group. And here you have a definition of social innovation that refers to the design and implementation of new solutions that imply conceptual, process, product, and organizational change which ultimately aim to improve the welfare and well-being of individuals and communities. I think INOS is very much into this realm as well, with a focus on education. Yesterday, we have seen in the poster sessions lots of examples that we could aim. They are, dealing with social innovation. The ultimate aim is to have an impact on society, definitely. And we talk about digital social innovation when it's involving the use of digital technologies. Digital social innovation, it's what we refer to, or also the group of projects that we were together with in the Horizon call for a project that we have been working with, which was called Open for Citizens. And this is one of the examples that I would like to bring to the discussion today. The focus of the project was to, try to equip citizens on using open data. What we could observe, it's a project that ended up a few years ago. We could observe that, the narrative around open data was very much related to, smart cities, and all the majority of the data sets that were released at the time were related to that view on cities, right? A lot of data about traffic, about parking slots, and so on. So we were wondering if, instead of having this top-down approach on releasing data sets, if we could, support instead a more bottom-up approach. So knowing what are the needs and the desires of citizens, what then would be the data sets that are needed there, what has to be open. And besides this, also, how can we, make citizens tinker with data, trying to overcome what is already the big digital divide in our societies, which is the ability to understand and actually use data. So, can open data become a commons was the focus of this project. And when we talk about open data as a commons, yesterday we had a very nice discussion around that and presentation in the World Cafe in the evening. We need to have to be able to define a resource as a common. We need to have a community. And we need to have also a set of social practices around this commons. So we need to design practices for social innovation in relation to open data, and we need to foster also a community of users that we will see it's somehow also already there. So in order to overcome this gap between the potential offered by open data and also the citizens' ability or capability to understand and use such potential, this specific project worked first on tools and methods, right? So designers comes with their toolkit, and we could see that they are actually missing tools and methods to actually work with data as a material for design. And within the project, we used actually hackathons as one of the tools in order to engage with citizens and communities. And also, try to work on the infrastructuring part related to the usage of open data. As also yesterday, we were talking about the infrastructure with Professor Giovanni Schiuma. So how big of an importance is to, create the context, of course, for the use of a given resource. In this case, we are talking about data, right? What we could see, and also in INOS, actually, we have been using a lot this tool, which is, if we want to call it tool or a process, which are the hackathons. What we could observe within this specific project and the different, hackathons we had is that, of course, which is one of the big problems of these kind of activities, right? It's the impact that at the end you have when you run a hackathon, a few days, and something, a concept or a ready to be implemented idea is there. But then, what's the sustainability of what is produced? And we identified as the pre-hackathon part of it as the core, actually, aspect to be worked on in order to make then whatever comes out of the hackathon itself as a sustainable product, service, or concept, or change in policies and so on. And here we go back to the idea of infrastructuring, right? So the idea that you need to be able to co-create together with different stakeholders, have them around the table, and the processes that we were going through here were very much, making us a sort of data mediator. So what we could observe, actually, in relation to open data in general, is that very often there is a role that is missing, which is the person that take care of or that try to involve the right stakeholders, actually, not only on the preparation of a hackathon, but it could be as simple as, tackling a specific challenge that is emerging from a given community or a neighborhood in the city, and so on. So data very often is there, but is not open. Departments in the municipalities do not know how to open data. They may not have even the resources to open the data sets. Bottom-up approaches, actually, to push for opening specific data sets are very often missing. And this we could see in different contexts. So this project was not only in Denmark, but we had pilots in Italy, in Spain, and in Sweden as well. So the data mediator, it's a thing we are still working on also in another project we have at the moment, which is called CAPE. And the aim of this project instead is to increase civic agency in the digital transformation of the public sector. So the idea here is that libraries nowadays and very often have a crucial role, of course, in society. And they are also places that are transforming at the moment. And we have, colleagues in our project that in the INOS project that could talk about that better than me. In this project specifically, we are trying to really prototype with the libraries, one library in Copenhagen, one again in Malmö, Sweden, and another one, the famous Oodi library in Helsinki. We are prototyping solutions, these civic innovation centers, in which, again, we try to support more bottom-up approaches, which is when it is about of public digital services. Behind them and keep always the feedback from the users themselves. So on the other side, and actually included in this role that we would like to experiment with the libraries, it's a sort of role of curating actually open data, right? Again, still with an idea to have the libraries, you know, as a place that is very anchored to the neighborhood in which they are placed, and to be able to have this connection with communities that are there. What if the library could be the place in which, you know, open data is also shared and curated, and the library, you know, assume the role of this data mediator that we were talking about in the other project. So, as I said, the library as a you know, physical place where knowledge and practice about open data can be exchanged. And what we are working on, and when we are talking about open data, social innovation, and all the projects that are our project that are dealing with this, we could observe that you know, we need to take care of these three axes that are you can see in this image here. People, challenges, and data at the same time. So what we could observe is that, you know, very often we have, as I said, the smart city paradigm on open data, right? So there are data sets there. Of course, parking is a crucial task in our everyday life, more in given cities than in others. But I mean, you can do a given set of things with data about parking slots, right? And there are lots of examples about projects around that. So there is data, but no, there is not a community around it. Sometimes instead there is a big challenge that is emerging from you know, the communities, but the data is not there. And when we were organizing also the specific hackathon events in the other, in the Open for Citizens project, but this is happening also in Cape, we could see that it's really difficult to, you know, work on the three different axes, but at the same time, you know, having the community engaged in a specific challenge, and of course, having the data available is crucial for the success not only of an event, but for you know, the outcome of a process that could benefit actually a given community or neighborhood. So what happens very often out of our project or our way of working with data is that you know, we work also on strategic reflections, and we have actionable insights and policy recommendation, for instance, on you know, data sets that should be open, or data sets that are not there but could be collected in order to, again, tackle an issue of societal concern. Yes, so just to, you know, be a little bit more practical, and I just wanted to go through an example of the outcome actually of an hackathon that we had. It was organized in Barcelona. Again, as I said, there was a lot of work on, you know, infrastructure, and so building the right ecosystem in order to have the right people around the table, so that the outcome of the hackathon itself, of this process, could then be taken up afterwards by specific stakeholders. In this case, it's the municipality of Barcelona. And I have to say that Barcelona is also a very special case in relation to digital social innovation, open data, and so on. They are quite ahead in all that, even with respect to other cities that might seem, you know, better in that regard as Copenhagen, for instance. So the case here is about Pollen Cat, which was an application that was designed during this hackathon, and with the aim of expanding the functionalities of existing open database of historical and current pollen levels, which is compiled by the municipality of Copenhagen in collaboration with Barcelona University. The application here integrates the database with the user contributed medical and geolocalization data and recommends personal daily routes to avoid or mitigate those mitigate those areas expected to have high concentration of pollen and other allergens to which the user is susceptible. So the user, it makes him or her sick. So there is a specific challenge here and a specific community that is challenged by the, environment, we can say, the cycles of nature. And there were some data sets there that could be combined with personal data, like your medical characteristics. You might be allergic to something, but not to something else. So in terms of the axis that I was showing before, there was a specific user need. So citizens that are prone to suffer allergies and other related respiratory problems would like to move safely in the city. Right? So there might be places in the city that are more, let's say, dangerous if you suffer for this than others. There was also a data opportunity. So as I said, the municipality of Barcelona, in collaboration with the university, was claiming to have data about geolocalized plants and so on. And we could have user data about their medical characteristics and history. But then again, here is the problem that we face in many of these projects, right? So how the data look like. And again, yesterday in the World Cafe, we were talking about this as well, right? So, which is related also to the, understanding of what it is open data when we define open data, when even municipality says, yes, we have the data and it's open. So clearly, if the data looks like this, so a couple of PDFs somewhere in a website, we cannot say that this is open data, right? So there was some work here to be done in order to actually release this data that was available as open data in a way that then could be actually used by the application, right? You cannot do much with a PDF in terms of crunching data and using it in an app. So once again, as an outcome of this process, beside the very nice and useful application that is still available for citizens in Barcelona, we were working afterwards with the municipality to make them aware of, first of all, what it is open data, but then also of the usefulness of this data and how it should be released. And the data set was actually released. So we believe this is a big impact, right, of a project and of, in this specific case, of an hackathon, which is, again, I would like to stress not only the 2 days, but then all the things that happen before and after those 2 days, which we call it actually infrastructuring. So to summarize, when we talk about open data and digital social innovation, we are talking about, from our perspective, so how we work on that, on the Service Design Lab. We talk about tools and methods. We talk about how to creatively use data in the design process, how to equip not only citizens, but also designers. So if we look into, let's say, the education part of it, we have a master on service design here at Aalborg University, and we work with data with our students. In terms of policy making and policy recommendation, as you can see, we try to have impact also at that higher level, working on infrastructuring. So what should be the ecosystem out there in order to allow us to use open us and the citizens and to have a more democratic use of data. And we try to, observe and compare and work with top-down and bottom-up approaches when it is about data in general, but open data in particular, comparing pros and cons of these processes. And with this, I would stop the presentation. I guess I took even too much time, but thanks for your attention. I will stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you, Amalia. It was perfect. Perfect on time, I would say. I don't see any question, but maybe Kai has one. Yes, Kai.
Yeah, but hello, it was really interesting to see these results of other projects that we have actually had a similar experiences with trying to open up the data for the town. And what my question is do you think that when we try to do these apps that democratize the use of data, I feel that more and more there is this digital fatigue, that people don't want anymore these apps, that we think that there could be apps that people collect data, share data, use the data, make their behaviors based on the data, but in reality they don't put these apps anymore in their phones. And maybe, especially we saw in this Corona time that there was an app to monitor and people didn't even download, and it was useless. All this development was useless.
Yeah.
So what do you think could be the solutions that we could still have awareness of the data and nudge the people some ways, but is there some other way?
Yeah, I mean, yes, in this presentation, thanks, Kai, for the question. And I agree with you. Definitely, especially a few years ago, there was this app, overwhelming, let's say, everybody talking about app and developing apps and so on. So in this specific case, I think the app was, tackling a real problem, right, of the users. And I think, I don't have the data now. Maybe, a couple of years later, nobody is using it any longer. But at the time, it was actually used and adopted by citizens. But it's true that when we talk about open data, it's not only about, developing applications. So, for instance, in another project, we were collaborating with the municipality of Milano in Italy. And there, the topic was about being more transparent in what is happening in the city in terms of construction. So what happens in Italy that doesn't happen in Copenhagen, for instance, is that from one day to the other, you have a street that is completely blocked. And, you have to take your kids to the school, and it takes 1 hour instead of 20 minutes, right? And so how to share this data in an open way. And it was not an app, but it was really releasing the construction work plans and so on municipality website, so that, people that would like to know about it could, check and use it. And not only citizens directly, but also other public services that then might inform the citizens about what is happening in the city, right? So yes, there might be this app fatigue, but it's open data can be used also in other ways, right? Not only through application, I would say.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat from Katerina about the duration of the project. I guess that the duration of student project varies a lot. How do you handle this at your university program?
Yes. So these projects here were research project. We didn't. So the students were not involved actually in. So we might give them, a brief that is very related to the project, but they were not actively working on the project. Usually, the duration of a project for the students is a semester project, so it's 3 months. I would say that for these projects instead, it's the duration of the the fundings that it's crucial here. Because you engage with a community for 3 years, and then how to sustain that. I mean, I think it's the challenge. For instance, now that we are working with this municipality in Copenhagen, how can we, sustain this collaboration after the fundings are gone, and how to leave actually the project in a way that, for instance, this envisioned civic centers that we are now prototyping will not die immediately, but will be actually taken up by the municipality. So yeah, it's a challenge, and I don't have really a clever answer.
Thank you, Amalia. I think Erika raised her hand, but I can't see the question if it's not in the chat. Sorry, that was, it's okay. Thank you very much. I think we can move on the next talk with Kai. Kai, just a minute, sorry. Kai, who is a senior researcher at the Center for Educational Technology in Tallinn University and a member of the INOS project, of course. And she is going to talk about learning from citizen science through several education institutions. I'm stopping my screen, Kai. I leave you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helena. Actually, there has been a change that now I am working in the School of Education in the same university as a professor of informal learning and adult education.
Okay, sorry about
that. My interests are still in informal activation of the communities, and so everything is the same. Okay, I was doing the wrong. Okay, so I decided to share with you some of the tips that came from the lessons what we learned from INOS cases, particularly these cases that we did as a citizen science activities, open knowledge building activities, together with INOS partners. So in methodically, we had a deliverable in which we planned how to create support for citizen science activities in higher education institutions and research libraries. But this was not so constraining for the developers of the activities. It had the phases of co-planning the citizen science activities together with the stakeholders, with the students. And then in this phase, this kind of challenges should have been discovered. and also thinking of the learning design framework, because in the universities we have to teach, we have the learning outcomes. This had to be thought of, and also what kind of learning outcomes there are for the participants. This was also one of the aims in this co-planning phase. Then in the co-design phase, there was the need to think how we do it, what kind of tools we use, what way we sequence the activities, do we do them in a long term, short term, and so forth. And also thinking about how to make it happen, having the facilitators. Then in the code delivery phase, it was the phase where we had to run it, and we had this very big constraint that most of the time when we had in this project, all the countries were in this corona closure, and very rarely we had possibilities actually to go to meet with real participants. Our students were online, and even more these different stakeholder groups too were not so accessible. And then as part of this citizen science activities, we also looked at how we could monitor these activities from the point of view of enhancing them during the activities and understanding whether they have impact. And for the purpose of the project, we created several tools that could be used in this phase. For example, we had active citizenship as a focus, and we developed active citizenship questionnaire that was filled in by all the participants, also by the teachers who took part, by the mentors who took part, and by the students who took part, and also by the external partners, citizens who participated in our activities. This was difficult because it was hard to make them to fill it in, but we still got quite many responses. So we had in these activities more than 400 people participated, but about 1/4 of them responded in the end to the survey. Then we also looked at these activities formatively. That meant that we collected, we had a grid of questions that we documented in each of the cases. And particularly what we looked at is how this agency and co-design was actually implemented. To what extent we were able to develop agency and active citizenship among our higher education students, among other stakeholders, also among citizens. So there were also other aspects that we documented, for example, the length of the activity, or what kind of digital components we used, and what were the learning goals and learning outcomes that came out from these activities. So all this was composed together into one very big comparative document. And today I am sharing some of the tips that came from summarizing all this, what we saw. So if we start from planning this type of activities, we saw that overall the higher education institutions are have quite a rigid structure in planning the learning, and it is difficult to add their new type of learning practices, new type of tasks, and also this kind of tasks in which we involve other partners or other universities or other stakeholders, so that everyone would benefit, everyone is engaged in the sufficient level. This requires more time and space. So one of the tips here is to plan citizen science activities from the start to be interdisciplinary challenges that help, like on the problem level, help to find interest among different participants inside and outside the universities. And the second tip here is that it is we as educators at the higher education, we need to be aware that more and more such openness in how we plan the learning has to be designed into the learning process. That means that if we write the course cards or even the study programs, and if we think of the tasks, we cannot fix them too much. That then only then we can be agile and we can take the chances that come to the universities, for example, through the projects or from the clients, or even from the interest of students, that we have to have such a space. Also, this, as already Amalia said, that it is important that there is this experience with how to organize more project-based, more hackathon-based, more design thinking-based approaches into these activities. But at the same time, now that I am there in doing these things quite many years with the students, I start also feeling that there might be the fatigue from using design thinking all the time and canvases and these little paper clips, that maybe we need to see if we can make these methods that work for making people to work together, to discover something about the data, something about the needs, about the values, to design. Can we do it differently? Not always with the same canvases and same methods. That is one of the things that is ticking in my head now more and more. Second, what is also very important is that we saw that it is possible to embed this learning citizen science activities into the tasks. It can be done differently, and I personally believe that there is more impact if we plan them as a tasks that go throughout the course, so that students do something step by step. They go in depth into this thing that they are looking at. They can create more connections with external stakeholders while designing, while doing this knowledge building together, or working on the data together. If we think usually the hackathon is defined as something short, like a 3 days very intensive event, and then it ends, then this type of approach of like a prolonged hackathon that continues as a design activity, it is a bit different, but I think it has more effect. that we also had some short-term events in our activities. That might also be a case, but then very often these results are not carried. The people don't take ownership enough from these results. Then we worked very much in INOS project to develop good tools to pedagogically intervene, trying to put citizen science into the learning outcomes and learning designs. And we also had a lot of tools that different canvases and approaches that could be used for co-designing the citizen science activities. Here you see one of the tools that we developed and used for talking about the data that the citizen science project is about. And although not all not in all the cases we use this, I have used this with several cases and even afterwards, and I have found that it is a very useful canvas to look the sphere principles and to understand better your data. So I would say, since we in INOS project, we knew and we ourselves developed these approaches, we were quite flexible in how to use one or another approach in designing learning outcomes, in designing the whole process. We were not so much stick to our own canvases, but for the novices in this area, I still believe that these canvases have a great value. But this has to be proved out now by others, whether they are worthful or not. So here on top you can see that in parallel there is this pedagogical learning design framework steps, and in implementation framework there are also steps that should guide you, and in some steps you could use some of the elements or canvases that might be useful. Because there is really a lot of literature, of experiences around, and what we did in INOS project, we analyzed all of it through to see, like, is there something that from which we can really learn from. Then regarding engagement and agency, it is very important to find the partners, and how it happened actually in most of our cases. It was the universities and the libraries extending out to our networks, to our alumni, to our already known partners, to find how we can create these challenging cases for them. But it should be actually vice versa, that if university is a known, or a research library is a known place where support can be received from researchers, from scientists to initiate citizen science activities, then I believe that they would reach out to us. And then there will be more and more need that we can then involve the students into the team where we help this client who wants to have citizen science activity as an approach to solve some challenge. But in most of our cases, it wasn't like this. Then in citizen science activities, very often we need to do group work. If we think of crowdsourcing activities, yes, they are such that we build up a good method, and then every individual can go and follow this method and collect data or enrich the data or do something with the data or knowledge. But we explored more such cases where people were in the groups where they could also discuss. And in these discussions, there is the need to have experts and facilitators. And usually in higher education, humans is a scarce resource. There are not so many facilitators into one course, usually one or two. So there have to be some institutional methods how you can actually involve the others. For example, if I want to involve my colleagues into this or that teaching project that I have, how it is, how they get salary and credits from this work. This is something that is not solved, or easily solved. So it is very important that we think that not we as the researchers and lecturers create these activities for the students and they are like participants, but from the start we have to put some learning outcomes into the design process, that they are creating agency to become change agents in the society, and this is one of their learning outcomes. And then this has to be built into the task as well, so that they can take action in this co-design and in evaluation as creators of the activity rather than just participants in the activity. So agency shifting is very important, and in some of our cases we were more successful than in the others. Especially good, I think, was Aalborg University, with because they are working very much with learning teams. And here you can see some of the instruments that they created, in which the students themselves were taking the agency in developing these co-design activities together with these external stakeholders. The other very interesting approach came from the cases from LIBER, that they noticed LIBER tried out several times quite similar activities for knowledge building, and they noticed that if you have too much like a pre-planning facilitation, sometimes it comes out that the people who come to your knowledge building activities, they are more self-organized. They don't need this facilitation. They may even take the drive of the activity in their own hands, and then we have to be quite flexible in changing our approaches. But that is only good, because what we want is developing the agency among the participants, not to keep the control in our own hands. Then, of course, digital mediation is one that has provided a lot of good tools that centralize different information accesses, or they also centralize how and where the data can be collected, or it provides also good tools with which it is good to collaborate together online. So the knowledge of these tools in among the communities is low. So there has to be some development steps within the activities in which the participants can take ownership of this, how to use these digital tools, and through this they can also develop new digital competencies. But Amalia also mentioned that people have a very low understanding of the data and the processes, what the way data are handled, and then how the data could be visualized and what we can read from this visualizations. I think these are very, very important skills that should be in the new digital competencies framework that we have, actually the European framework of digital competencies for the teachers, for the students, and for the citizens. But this data literacy in this level is not there. So it's something to think of in the political level, how we can go deeper into these processes that actually are already there in the smart cities and in these activities, that people would be more able to handle it. So I have been very long time a digital researcher. So in digital research, very often the functionalities of the tools mediate, offer some opportunities, what you can or what you cannot do with the data. So, and there are many digital tools that some have some similar and some additional functionalities that could be used. So the suggestion is, there are two suggestions, that first of all, that if the participants are not so familiar with different tools, it is good to have not so many tools for interaction, rather keeping them in one tool, such as with the elderly people, we kept them in one tool only, that is the Trello tool. You can see on the left here. The other thing is that it's better to think first what you want, then you can look whether there are such tools that will support it. And then iteratively, this will also change what you can do, because sometimes there are not so good functionalities in the tool that we choose, and we have to change the activities. It is also important to choose the tools that motivate the participants to work in a more self-organized mode. About scaffolding, I already mentioned that it is difficult to let go the control from the hands of the tutor or facilitator, but we should think that this is what we have to do. And it is important to think how we can involve more previous participants or other experts or mentors into these activities. With a digital mode, it is more easy. And experience, here you can see this overall results from this survey that we did. And the survey had 3 dimensions related with knowledge, action, and policy making. And it came out that in our activities, the participants did not get enough of skills how to integrate this kind of data results that they got, or the results that they got, into the action level and in the policy actions. So this is something that we can think when we plan the further activities. And one of the critical things that we found was that from these activities, we got a different level of openness to the data, such as there are small projects that are semi-open or open somewhere in the internet, but they are all scattered. So the results from these open knowledge activities are scattered, and they are not so easily reusable for the others. So universities and public libraries, here is the chance to create like a hub in which you can get help from where you can see what are the earlier good results, good data, good knowledge products that you might reuse. And here is also something that is important that Tallinn University tested out, and I think also Aalborg University partly tried out some gamification approaches that could motivate the participants. Especially here is something that is motivating the students themselves in planning the full project. This kind of open badges approach. And also evaluation in during and after the project is very important. So there have to be thought of the methods, how you monitor the full process so that you can do the corrections, and how you monitor whether you are achieving these learning outcomes from your students. They can actually self-monitor themselves as well. And this is all that is from the tips. So if you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you, Kai, for sharing these tips, your thoughts, and I think you've underlined a lot of very interesting issues that we shared, like about learning practices, renew our methods, communities. I will just take one question from Andre. Great points. To overcome internet fatigue, we need to be more engaging. Could you elaborate a bit more on the alternatives to design thinking and using the similar canvas at all time?
Okay, so maybe now if what I have used myself, I have used these tools in which there are some functionalities that you can interact with the data in the outdoors, so that we show how people can, with some tools, they can take control of the data, such as the data, cultural data that are available, or some other data that they want to collect. And we show them through the tools that it is so easy to create to collect answers jointly to some challenges, or to make the people more aware of some of the things that we have in digital archives, and make them to interact and then collect the data again from this interaction. That maybe this kind of interactive tools, digital tools, can help sometimes to think differently, because the tool with the faces, how you interact with the tool, some ways also provides the faces of like a design and thinking of the data and validating the data and so on, that could be helpful. But I don't have actually a good solution. I think that I have a fatigue from these canvases, and there should be some other ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Kai. Thank you very much. So I didn't mention it, but you will find the recording of the session if you want to see or share this presentation on our YouTube channel. So thanks. Then I'll give the floor to Rosie Allison from LIBER. Rosie is Community Engagement and Communication Officer at LIBER Europe. And she's going to present one of our deliverable, a roadmap co-creating a shared vision for citizen science in higher education, pitfalls and recommendations. So thanks, and I leave you the floor, Rosie.
Thanks very much. Share my screen. Can you all see my slides?
Yes, perfectly.
Excellent. So thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm going to be presenting the report that was created by LIBER, co-creating a shared vision for citizen science in higher education, pitfalls and recommendations. Now, before I begin, I have to state that I was not actually responsible for writing this report, so I am reporting on the work of others. It was created by my colleagues Tatiana, Vaso and Iris. So if you look at the Zenodo link here, that I think my colleague Tanya should be able to put in the chat for you, you will see that they were the authors of the report, but this report was very much co-created with participants of the 2 vision building workshops that we had. So all credit goes to these 3, but also to the participants of the workshop. So how was this report created? Well, it was created through 2 vision building workshops that took place last year in 2021 during the pandemic, so obviously online. And they were called Open and Citizen Science in Higher Education, Co-creating a Shared Vision. And the second one was called Shakers and Makers, Key Stakeholders in Open Science and Citizen Science. They were highly interactive workshops. Key stakeholders in citizen science were invited to take part in group mapping exercises to illustrate the current state of affairs of citizen science in higher education. There were slightly different stakeholders for the 2 workshops. The first, which I will explain later, and the results of the first very much led into the results of the second. So they built on each other. And it's the total of these 2 workshops that informs the main body of the report, which you can see. So the first vision building workshop, Open Citizen Science in Higher Education, Co-creating a Shared Vision. This was held on the 16th of March in 2021 online. And the main stakeholders in this one were higher education institution, academic and library staff and students. So the people who were really involved in implementing citizen science activities, practicing citizen science activities actually on the ground. Several points of discussion here, their experiences with open science and citizen science, the main stakeholders that they saw as being involved in open science and citizen science activities, their working routines daily when they're taking part in citizen science activities, and the knowledge and skills gaps that prevent them from furthering citizen science. And this led, of course, to some best practices. And the aim of this workshop was to foster the best practices and to design some novel approaches to citizen and open science integration in higher education. And you can actually see this one on our INOS YouTube channel if you want to see what the content of the workshop was actually like. So I'm going to briefly go through, I can skip the structure of the workshop, the results that we got from this first workshop. So participant experiences were collected and their recommendations can be split more or less into 3 categories, and those are advocate, engage, and organize. So advocate, why is advocating important for the implementation of citizen science? Well, participants emphasized that whilst the bottom-up approach is effective in formulating and carrying out citizen science projects, top-down is really needed to create real structural change, as I think some of my other project members have been emphasizing as well. Policymakers are key. If they need to be engaged and convinced so that researchers have the resources, they have the time, they have the funding to be able to implement citizen science activities. So bottom up can only go so far. We need this top-down approach in order to really implement citizen science activities. And these resources that could be given from a top-down approach would give stronger motivation for people to take part in citizen science activities. For example, if there was resources to offer training to citizens and to researchers, then hopefully this would create more of a cultural change where we have more people involved in citizen science in the long term, not just on a project by project basis. And finally, advocating for clear open science and citizen science strategy at the institutional level can help unite and motivate the stakeholders. So often in an institution, there's not even a clear definition of what citizen science is. And if you don't have that, then it's very difficult to unite all of the stakeholders moving forward with citizen science activities. So advocating was one point that the participants really emphasized as important for citizen science implementation at their universities. Next up, engage. The participants of the workshops saw many different stakeholders as being important for citizen science activities. Many different stakeholders from diverse backgrounds, from diverse ages, and also different faculties as well. And obviously, to engage all of these different stakeholders, you need to use the right methodology and tools for each one. There isn't a one-size-fits-all to motivate people to engage in citizen science activities. It needs to be tailored for each one. So having the right methodology and tools to engage each stakeholder, give them the external motivation that they need to take part in citizen science activities was something that the participants of this workshop really stressed. They had the idea of utilizing bridges, that they called them, people who can connect between all of the different stakeholders involved to make sure that they are engaged and they're understanding the activity and the benefit of the activity in their own way. And again, we had this point of the balance between bottom-up and top-down approaches. It's important to engage citizens as they address the societal concerns, but we also need the researchers to be given the tools and resources to make the projects happen. So engaging all stakeholders with the correct means was a key point that the participants gave during this workshop. And finally, organize. I'm sure if anyone here has ever tried to organize a citizen science activity, you realize that you need to consider many different things, and the participants emphasize that as well. They mentioned the importance of establishing a co-responsibility through clearly defined goals for everybody involved in each activity, clearly defined roles and responsibilities as well. And this needs to be done before the activity takes place. Also so that you can establish the benefits for all stakeholders at the beginning of the process. It needs to be very clear for citizens and researchers alike, what are they going to gain from this activity? And this then needs to be respected and carried through towards the end of the project. On a more practical level, the participants of this workshop mentioned that it would be good to have a database of citizen science projects so that people can get some inspiration. We can see this already starting to happen with sites such as SciStarter, and I think also ESCA has on their website many citizen science projects that you can take a look at. So we can already see this being implemented actually in the field. And a final point was the importance of embedding best practices of citizen science projects into the proposals for new projects. This means that every time people don't have to reinvent the wheel when they're creating citizen science projects, because they can look back and see what's been done before, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and this obviously makes it more efficient moving on with further citizen science projects. So that was the first workshop. So this was with stakeholders, the people that are practicing citizen science, so students and researchers from higher education institutes. The second one, Shakers and Makers, key stakeholders in open science and citizen science. This was a slightly different group of people that were engaged. This was management staff, policymakers, funding bodies, members of networks, etc. People who would have more say in creating actual real cultural change or policy change when it comes to implementing citizen science in higher education institutes. And the points of discussion here were the advantages for citizen science, interaction between higher education institutes, and the role of citizen science in the curricula. And then we also discussed the barriers in the implementation of citizen science and the best practices and action points moving forward. And the aims of this workshop were a little bit more concrete, to bring together a wider spectrum of stakeholders that either are already or have the potential to collaborate for the deployment of open science and citizen science activities in higher education. So I will, looking at the clock, briefly go through these. Anyone who is at this workshop, I'm sure, already knows the advantages of citizen science for education and research, so I won't go through them too much. Bridging the gap between education and communities, contributes to public engagement, sustainability of knowledge, etc. The barriers, however, could be split mainly into a few categories. So first of all, the lack of awareness. The participants noted that amongst policymakers in particular, there was a lack of awareness of the importance of citizen science. And this actually also leads to the lack of resources, because if there's not awareness of the importance, then obviously there's a lack of funding. So this is kind of a trickle down effect here. So, and when there's a lack of resources, it means that researchers don't have the time, they don't have the money to be able to put on citizen science activities. An insufficient transfer of knowledge was noted as well, and also an absence of a standard approach to citizen science. Again, a lack of a definition, a lack of a clear goal for all of the higher education institutes together working towards the same common theme. From this workshop, there were some best practices found as well. Participants suggested that business models of citizen science projects need to be adapted to the specific context. There is not a one size fits all for a business model for a citizen science project. They had the idea of giving funding opportunities as a business model to PhD researchers if they engage citizens in their research projects. And they also stated the importance that best practices should be shared and magnified through training. But again, this leads back to the necessity to have funding for this training. And then some points, action points for cultural change. The modernization of curricula, citizen science can be a tool in this, modernizing curricula, moving away from the idea that just scientists in a silo can create their own projects. We also need to engage citizens to have that societal impact. So the participants emphasized that citizen science can actually be a tool in the modernization of higher education curricula, and also demonstrating the value of citizen science. As I've said, if there's not the view that citizen science is useful, then it's never going to get the funding. And the same goes for citizens as well. They're never going to take part in citizen science activities if they don't see the benefit for them and for society as a whole. And engaging and understanding communities. There's a lot of different stakeholders involved in citizen science projects, and they all needed to be engaged and understood in different ways. So these were the main conclusions of the two vision building workshops. Common agreement is that systematic change is needed if citizen science is going to be integrated into higher education. Awareness raising is needed amongst certain key stakeholders, including policymakers, researchers, and crucially at the ministerial level as well. A balance between bottom-up and top-down approaches is definitely a recurring theme, and they're necessary to create a sound structure for citizen science implementation, whilst also respecting societal needs. Citizen science implementation should not only be a goal in itself, but also a tool to the modernization of higher education institutes. Once the full awareness of this role is achieved, hopefully the vital funding should follow, enabling the silos to be removed and significant cultural change to be realized. So those were very briefly, I'm sorry if I rushed through them too much, I was looking at the clock the whole time. Those were the main findings of the two vision building workshops. If you want a more detailed view, you can also read the full report, which has a full list of all of the different points that were brought up by the participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie, and thank you, LIBER, for making this work. It's very interesting to have gathered all these participants and to have summarized this feedback into this clear, useful presentation and this roadmap. And thank you for putting the link into the chat. I don't see, thank you. I don't see any question in the chat. Maybe it's nearly 10:30. Thank you so much. So we can have like just 5-minute break. We come back at 10:35, and then please stay connected at the same room in Zoom, because we will have like a wonderful round table with 4 panelists to go beyond INOS. So take this 5 times to grab a coffee, to think about these interesting discussions, and then we're coming back at 10:35, 20:37, let's say. Thanks.